Let's bring in MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian. Also with us, former FBI Special Agent Asha Rangappa and MS Now National Security Analyst Chris O'Leary, a former senior FBI counterterrorism official. Ken, it has been almost a year since Comey posted that message, that image on Instagram. Walk us through how we got here.
Well, FBI Director Kash Patel and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said yesterday that the FBI thoroughly investigated this matter and had evidence that James Comey had criminal intent, although they did not specify what that evidence was. Look, the indictment, the central paragraph of the indictment says that any reasonable person would interpret that Instagram post as a threat to the life of the president. One legal commentator called that the most embarrassing paragraph ever written in a Justice Department document. And that gives you an idea of how this is being greeted in legal circles. I've really never seen such universal denunciation of an action by the Justice Department, not just from the usual corners, but from people like Jonathan Turley, the conservative legal analyst on Fox News, who said this is facially unconstitutional. There's lots of case law about what constitutes a threat, and this just does not seem to meet the test. Again, we don't know all the evidence that they had. They interviewed James Comey, the Secret Service did. But what's absolutely clear is that this case is part of a campaign by Todd Blanche to amp up these so-called retribution, these weaponization cases that the DOJ is investigating or prosecuting against Donald Trump's perceived enemies. And it comes after Donald Trump explicitly ordered the Justice Department to do this when he sent a message that may have been a private message intended for Attorney General Pam Bondi back in September. He explicitly named James Comey. And of course, he's been calling for Comey to be prosecuted for years. So this is many people see this as a very dark moment for the Justice Department and for our country, Anna.
All that context is so important. I do want to just note the two charges in this case are threats against the president and successors and transmitting a threat in interstate commerce. And the Justice Department saying in the filing that those numbers, 86, 47, a reasonable recipient who's familiar with the circumstances would interpret as serious expression of an intent to do harm to the president of the United States. Chris, you have investigated plenty of cases involving threats to public officials. Is this the smoking gun the administration claims it is?
It is not. And I have overseen investigations of this type, and this would not have gotten past any U.S. attorney that I've ever worked with. So as Ken laid out, the two threats, threats against the president, it has to be a true threat, and it can't be political hyperbole. And an objective, reasonable person has to conclusively assess that 86-47 would mean a specific threat against the president. And I will tell you, being a native New Yorker, 86 originally comes from Chumley's, which was a Prohibition-era bar that used the term 86 to tell its patrons to sneak out the back when the police were raiding the place. Then it became picked up by the restaurant industry and the bar industry to throw somebody out. But now it's more commonly used when you're out of a product. If the lava cake is no longer something that's on the menu, they've 86'd it. So the idea that this is a term that is commonly known as a threat against the president is just patently false. And on the other charge, 875, there's another Supreme Court ruling which differentiates freedom of speech from a threat. And it's called the Brandenburg Standard. And it has to be very specific. It has to be imminent, meaning that assault is going to happen imminently, and that they actually have to have the means to do it, so that they had the tools and they were intending to actually carry out this attack soon. None of those are here, which is why if one of my agents brought this to an assistant U.S. attorney, they would have politely declined it very quickly. And it's also telling why they went to another state rather than EDVA to have the grand jury in North Carolina, because it wasn't working in Northern Virginia.
Some additional information that I think is important to acknowledge is that Comey deleted that post not long after he had posted it, after it generated the uproar against it. And he came out denouncing violence against anyone just 4 days after he made that post. He was also interviewed on MS Now's on the show with Nicole Wallace. And here's how he justified his decision to share that image initially.
We saw in the sand someone had arranged shells with numbers. And Patrice, my wife, said, why would someone put an address in the sand? And I said, I don't know. And we stood over it, and I said, I think it's some kind of like political message. And she said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, meant to remove an item from the menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me, as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. I said, that's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. And I did. And I posted it on my Instagram account and thought nothing more of it.
Asha, does anything in Comey's account stand out to you as criminal?
Well, Anna, the elements of the crime include that the threat be willingly and knowing. So obviously, his own account of that doesn't meet that standard. But as Chris mentioned before, this just doesn't even pass the smell test for the First Amendment. So just to give you an idea of the bar this has to meet, the concept of true threat, whether something is actually a threat being directed against the president, comes from a 1969 case called Watts versus United States. And that involved a political debate where someone was saying to a group of people that he refused to join the army. And if the government made him join the army and gave him a rifle, the first person in his sights would be LBJ. And you can see that that's, if you're going to get to something that's relatively direct, that would be it. And the court there said that's hyperbole and that we need to keep, the space of political debate open, and that just wasn't a true threat. We are even further removed from that when you have a design in the sand. This is like trying to prosecute someone for doing an interpretive dance or something like that. So I just don't see this going anywhere. But I think, Anna, one thing that we have to remember as we look at the pattern of Trump, even before the second administration, he looks to the spectacle of investigation and charging someone. Like, I don't know that the merits of the case matter to him. We saw this with Hillary Clinton. We saw this with trying to start the investigation against the Bidens through President Zelensky. He kind of just wants the media coverage of it. I think it's just icing on the cake if it goes anywhere. And I think that's why we keep seeing these very, very legally dubious charges coming, because I don't think actually seeing them through successfully is the ultimate goal.
So are you surprised a grand jury actually brought this indictment?
I am, but remember that the evidence presented to a grand jury is one-sided. And I suspect that the prosecutors that were giving information to the grand jury did not advise them of the First Amendment standard. So that's going to be something that is going to come up, in front of a judge. And I suspect that this case will not go very far.
We do know the Department of Homeland Security launched an investigation over that post, even questioning Comey last year. Yesterday, FBI Director Kash Patel said that this investigation has been months in the making. Take a listen.
This has been a case that's been investigated over the past 9, 10, 11 months. These cases take time. Our investigators work methodically. They are career agents, career prosecutors who work these matters. They call the balls and strikes in the field as they see fit, pursuant to the facts of the case and the law.
Chris, again, it's been almost a year since this post was made. What might investigators have been looking at over all that time?
My suspicion is nothing. My suspicion is this was directed by Kash Patel and others on the 7th floor of FBI headquarters and the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche. Let's just remember that Todd Blanche is auditioning for the role of attorney general, and Kash Patel is desperately trying to hold on to his job, and he's, completely unfit for it. I would say the weaponization of DOJ and the FBI in this case is demonstrative of the fact that neither of them should be in those positions, and it's an assault on our systems of justice, and really alarming when we're going after our political adversaries using the tools of the court and the substantial investigative tools of the FBI.
I mean, that's what we keep hearing from Democrats, certainly saying this is just another example of Trump's weaponization of the DOJ to go after his enemies, something Trump accused the Biden administration of doing to him. Our Lisa Rubin has this new digital piece for MS Now, and she writes that the Comey case should not be viewed in isolation. And she highlights several DOJ actions in just the last 24 hours, including demanding that a federal judge allow the White House ballroom project to move forward, reportedly executing search warrants on Minneapolis businesses for alleged fraud, and bringing another indictment against an aide to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Asha, how big of a shift from the status quo is this?
This is getting just into a clown show at this point. I think that we've gone beyond kind of scary and frightening to really egregious to just plain farcical, I think. What I think you're seeing in some of these filings, Anna, is they literally look like Truth Social posts. They look like Trump kind of dictating what he wants to put into a court filing. And I think what this administration and what this Justice Department is running into is really the conflict between what Trump wants and, you know, in the court of public opinion and what the standards are for the court of law. The Justice Department has actually already been reprimanded in another case for filing something that the judge said, you know, might belong on a cable news show, but does not belong in a court filing. So I just think that we're really at a point where we're losing the legitimacy. I mean, I think that's been lost, but I think to a point where even your ordinary person on the street is going to realize that this is just has gotten out of hand.